So let me go to the pharmacist and educationist, Dr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. And I would like to commend the maker of statement, the Honorable Member of Parliament for Nadoli Kalio constituency, on the need for a legal and regulatory framework on human organ and tissue donation and transplant. Mr. Speaker, most of the time when we talk about organ transplant, everybody's mind turns to kidney. We forget about the heart, we forget about the liver, we forget about pancreas, and most of the time we even forget about the intestines and the lungs. Mr. Speaker, in order to govern and ensure that we have an ethical practice as far as organ and tissue transplant is concerned, it's very critical that we as a country have such a law in place. A typical example we want to look at in the United States, they have what we call the National Organ Transplant Act that prohibits and regulates the organ transplant and how it gets to another patient. They also have, in addition, what we call the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act that also regulates how people can give their organs to people. Mr. Speaker, it's quite unfortunate that we in Ghana still don't have such a law in place. Because you know what happens. You know what happens is that there are different approaches. Most countries may want to look at presumed consent. Some countries may look at what we call the informed consent. And some countries may look at what we call the required request system. Mr. Speaker, because we don't have any legal system in place, people are able to do whatever they want, disregarding the risks that comes along with transplant. But if we should have this law in place, Mr. Speaker, what it's going to do is going to help. Any one of us could be at an end-stage issue where we may need an organ transplant. But because we don't have a legal system in place, we don't have a system that we can be able to locate. We don't have a system that will be able to identify how many people that are in need of transplant and how many people that are ready to donate their organs for transplant. Because such countries that have such laws in place, people are able to either go under the presumed organ transplant system or the consent system. In that case, people can decide when they are going for their driver's licenses, they can decide to voluntarily donate one part of their organ when they should pass on, or they can give that permission to their relative to be able to do that. So it's very critical that we have such a thing in place. Then, of course, because we also don't have an act in place, a country like the United States right now is talking about over 104,000 people who are on the waiting list to receive one organ or the other for transplant. But because we don't have it in place, we are not able to justify who should be fairly given a transplant or an organ because we don't have this law. So it's very critical that we should have this act in place. In that case, when any of us should be in need